Hi, this is Commander Mark Devine, founder of SEAL Fit and author of The Way of the SEAL and Unbeatable Mind. And you are fortunate enough to be listening to T.W. Smith at Kung Fu Podcast. Hoo-yah!
Exploring the culture, the adventure, and the impact of martial arts. That's what we do at Kung Fu Podcast, and I'm your host, T.W. Smith. Thank you so much for letting me be part of your martial arts journey. Since this program began, we've gone through hosts of stories, news, things that make sense, things that make no sense, some things that we're doing great at, and things that we just basically need a little bit more work. When you all share with me your thoughts, your feelings, how you feel like I'm doing, I'd listen to it. My skin is thick, so I can take some of the productive criticisms. But by far, the thank yous I receive from around the world and people who are listening on different platforms means a lot to me. In fact, that reminds me, I did not realize, I'm still trying to figure out some of the nuances. I received a thank you from TuneIn, a platform that carries all types of different broadcasts, and I got a message from them that said basically, thank you for the Decisions Calisthenics program, but I have not figured out a way to reply to it yet. So I wanted to put it here on the air. Thank you so much for sending me those notes. I also got one that was really cool. A gentleman wrote me on the Facebook page and said, I really enjoy your programming. You sometimes get a little long-winded. And I thought, who, me? Getting long-winded? That's not me at all. Actually, I do know when I get impassioned about something, I can lay some air behind it. But I'm not going to do that in this program because this is a very special program, the last programs we're going to have for 2017. And it's going to be a two-part series because there was over 2 hours of an interview with a fantastic gentleman named Doug Perry. Many of us know him as Hanshi, Doug Perry. He is also United States Marine Corps Retired Major Doug Perry, a father, and a fantastic gentleman who lives up in a really small town up in the mountains of North Carolina called FlatRock, North Carolina. I met him because he was one of the featured guests and was teaching at the Shuri-Te Bujitsu Kai seminar in Dallas, North Carolina just a few months ago. After the seminar, he and I stood out in the parking lot and just talked about martial arts, translations, culture, all types of things, and it led to me asking him if I could come up to his house to interview him. He graciously accepted, and I cannot tell you all how important that time with him really meant to me. During part one of the interview, you're going to be listening for 5 really important pieces of things that he's going to be talking about. Before I went up there, I had my list of questions. Then I sent out a note to Professor Samantha May, who is in Okinawa right now as we speak, Mr. Ian Abernathy, and Mr. Jesse Enkamp. And all of them extended questions to me that they wanted to relay to him, and he took all of them and shared some really, really important information with us. When the interview begins, I'm setting things up, getting the microphone set up, but I had asked him how in the world did he, a man who's been around the world, find this little town that I think was founded in like 1807, had the first post office in 1829. How did he find this little old place up in North Carolina? So when it clicks in, he's telling me a little bit of a story about how he found the place and then what you can and you cannot do in some of these little small town communities. Before the interview begins, I want to make sure I let you know there is a little bit of colorful language along the way, nothing really bad, but I just want to make sure in case the kids are listening or something that you know that there's a damn or two and an ass or two that kind of comes along, but other than that, it's all good. So get yourself settled in. We're getting ready to start the first hour of the interview with 81-year-old Okinawan trained martial artist Doug Perry.
But this is a very protected area.
Okay.
You don't do something out here unless somebody approves it. In fact, I built me a little shed out there unbeknownst to that. But everybody knows who I am, so the guy came out and said, you can't have that. He said, unless it's a potting shed. And I said, oh, it is a potting shed.
Did you go look up what a potting shed was?
Sit down, Bill.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think we're good to go. I've got some questions from some of the folks who I was saying to you earlier. One is Jesse in Camp, Ian Abernathy, Samantha May. These are some folks of mine, friends of mine, who have packed some questions up for me.
Yeah, so y'all correspond on
yes,
that.
yes. So we had some of those. And then what really triggered a lot was the fact that you and I were able to sit down and, after I got to meet you over there at Alex's place there in Dallas and through the Shirite Bujitsukai and Troy Price. And I love that organization. But I don't even know how long you and I stood out there in the parking lot and talked that night. But after that, I knew, that I really would like to, schedule some time with you to sit down and like we are now here and talk with you about just your experiences. We were just talking about how you started, with the boxing in the 40s and then in the 50s, you were training. And that leads me to one of the first questions. And I'm sure some of the stories here will come along as we go along. But Samantha had asked me, during the 50s, karate was first began to be practiced by the American servicemen in Okinawa and abroad. And so Samantha was wondering, how did the servicemen get involved? How did that process start to where someone like yourself as a Marine could get into a dojo there in Okinawa?
Okay. Now, then we're talking, I started in 1956.
Okay.
At Paris Island. And the way I got started was I was training on the Marine Corps boxing team. And I saw these, now I'd never even heard the word karate. What would happen is you had guys from, especially World War II and Korea, that had been stationed in Okinawa. And these guys would train in Okinawa, not a whole lot of them, come back, and they would train when they got back. They didn't have dojo as we know dojo today. Okay, most of the Air Force, some of them did, and the Army, but for the Marines, we were always moving around. We trained wherever, out in the yard, wherever we could find a place. Nobody paid any attention to what style you were. Nowadays, how people get so taken up with, I bleed, this type of system. We trained, didn't matter. It did not matter what your system was. All we did was train. And down there in 1956, we were at Lyceum, which is the big gym on Paris Island, and we were boxing. Boxing was huge in the 50s. It was, in the military, big. I had to get a waiver to get in the Marine Corps. I was too little. Back in those days, you had to be 5'5" or 6" and weigh 125 pounds. And I was like 5'4" and weighed 112 pounds. I was a flyweight. And but they contacted headquarters of the Marine Corps, and et cetera. Actually, my dad talked to a recruiter in Charlotte. He actually put me in the Marine Corps. I had a little problem growing up in North Charlotte, a big problem. And the guy said he's too little. He said, well, he's a 4-time, National Golden Gloves champion. So they called headquarters of the Marine Corps, and the colonel up there said, I don't give a damn if he weighs 40 pounds, put him in. It was that big a thing in the Marine Corps. Anyway, I was at Paris Island. I graduated from boot camp, and believe it or not, had double pneumonia. Been in the hospital for 2 or 3 weeks, and came out, and I was trying to get myself back in shape. And I saw these guys over in the corner, and they were going at it, but they were kicking each other. And I'm going, hell, that ain't fair. So I went over there, and of course, most of those, everybody kind of knew who the boxers were, And even the judo players like Ernie Cates and people like that were big-time judo type people. But karate was almost unheard of, except for the few military. Anyway, there's 5 or 6 of them over there. So I went over and, they said, hey, good luck up at Lejeune when you go to Lejeune and this, that, and the other. And anyway, I said, what are y'all doing? They said, well, we train in judo and karate, and I knew what judo was. I heard the judo chop, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But to me, judo was wrestling.
Okay.
And anyway, we talked for a few minutes, and I said, could I try it? And they said, sure, butt on out here. So I got out there and spent a half an hour looking up at the ceiling because they're sweeping my feet out from under me. And I got up and talked. I said, I really like this. This is neat. Mm-hmm. So I started training when I could. Mm. Then, of course, I went to Camp Lejeune, and there's a different bunch up there. Mm-hmm. Most of the guys coming back were Shobayashi-Ryu and Isshin-Ryu in the Marine Corps, and Goju-Ryu. That was pretty much, and Wechi-Ryu. Pretty much it, but not many. And then I got to... Went from there to Cherry Point, and of course kept training, and we had guys just get together and train. Mm-hmm. None of us even wore a patch.
Okay.
And most of us didn't have a whole gi.
Okay.
Seriously.
Okay.
Didn't care. Didn't have any equipment. Nothing.
Right. You just went with what you got.
That was it. And then I ended up on recruiting duty, of all places, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and they thought they were punishing me. But, going back and talking about that, I have a national shag dance championship trophy over there. I was the oldest person ever to win the national championship in shag
dancing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, but anyway, ended up going to... getting orders. I was on recruiting duty, and they wanted to extend me. But I'd been in the Marine Corps then 8 years. Never been in combat. Of course, we didn't have a war. And I refused. And I said, I want, if I'm going to stay in the Marine Corps, I need to find out what war is about. So they said, okay, smart ass, you'll find out. They give me orders of Vietnam.
Ooh.
So I got out to Camp Pendleton, and you had to go through a processing thing out there. And there were some guys out there training. They were Goju guys, okay, and some Isshin-Ryu guys. And so we trained. And anyway, then I went to Okinawa and went through all the mess that we had to do to get to Vietnam. And I... went down to Agina to Tatsuo Shimabuku's dojo, Isshin-Ryu dojo. I had to pay $1 to special services to train forever in Isshin-Ryu dojo.
Okay.
$1 to special services, and I think they paid Tatsuo-san, I think $20 a month. But our dojo in Agina, there was 2 of them. There was one up at Hamada, and that's where John Bardashevitz, and he's pretty well known. He lived on Okinawa, but I trained down at Agina, walked from the base to the train. And I went in there, and the first thing he did, because he wanted to let you know, it was almost like he would test the non-Okinawans. Mm-hmm. There's about six Marines in the dojo and about 9 or 10 Okinawans. That was the whole dojo. And it was in his backyard. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I went in and we had to... First thing he did was put me on the maki board, the Shikodachi. the Japanese call it shikodachi. The Hogan for that, which has kind of gone away, the language, is hachimonji dachi.
Which I want to put, you actually educated me yesterday when we were confirming meeting today, is that Samantha May is the professor who I mentioned to you that did her work in Okinawa and has a whole lot of research and is actually trying to help maintain the Uchi and Naga language that you said is Hogan is synonymous with that for the most part.
Yeah, that's what. Now, keep in mind that when I went to Okinawa, okay, most of the old masters over there spoke both Japanese and Hogan, and they spoke no English. Of course, we spoke no Japanese. When they corrected you, it was usually with a or they kick your leg, and you figured, well, I'm doing something wrong. What am I doing wrong?
That's so funny you said that. The first time I was learning the Longstaff, Shaolin Longstaff, I did not know any Chinese. I was in Houston, and a gentleman was teaching me, and every time I would do something wrong, I would get smacked, right? Because he didn't speak English.
Right.
And by the end of the day, I kept wondering what this word "boo" meant, right? And so I was like, whatever it is, and I was looking through the dictionary, trying the Chinese dictionary. All it meant was no. Right? So it was so funny you say that, because that's exactly how I learned a lot of the things, was just a whack across the hand or the shoulder.
Yep.
So the old masters there were speaking a blend of Hogan and Japanese.
And we did not know the difference. I still, to this day, cannot separate, because a lot of the stuff that I learned was, spoken in Hogan, but I didn't know the difference between Hogan and Japanese. My son, Jason, who's fluent in Japanese, I'll say something to him that I heard, 60 years ago, and he was said, "Dad, that's not Japanese. It has to be Hogan." So I never knew one from the other. And there were certain things that were said and how they were said that I never knew the roots of. I mean, I knew who they came from, but I didn't know the roots of, because the language, the Hogan has like 5 sounds, where Japanese has like 8.
Okay.
And anyway, since they would put me in hachimonji dachi or shikodachi, 20 minutes punching the maki board. And being a boxer, I was used to using my shoulder, to move. And he come by there and hit me on the shoulder, and I paralyzed my right side. And that's kind of how, like you were saying, that we got corrected. And but he would, and we would train for, I don't know, hour and a half. And then he would sit up there and have tea and talk to us. Didn't understand one damn word he said, but he would talk for a little bit, and then he would retire and go in. And that's when we started like kumite.
Okay.
We'd get out there and fight for another hour, and then somehow I had to walk back to the barracks. But that was a very enlightening time. But what it really taught me later on, as I was studying, and I think this is something we've lost today, that the essence of Okinawain Karate, and this is, is that maki water training is totally essential. It doesn't mean that, when my wife and I got married, I had to, and over the years what happens is your hands will evolve. Some of my students who've only been doing maki training about 10 years, they have the big knuckles, but they're soft. Okay, they're softer. And I think, and I don't mean to use this the wrong way, that's the Lord's way of protecting the hands while they develop. Now, up until I was in my 40s, I had the big knuckles. And I know I'm rambling, but when my wife and I got married, you know how you put your hand on each other and they take a picture of hands? My wife, who's very delicate, you know, Southern aristocracy, she said, he's not putting that claw on my hand and take a picture of it. But years ago when I was in Okinawa, you know, I'm talking about especially in the early 60s, you walk down the street and you hear boom, boom, boom behind every house. And that's when they had the little, little house, little ishiganto out front. You had your karashishi on top, the tiles like you had outside, the sliding doors, no locks, etc. A maki board in every backyard.
Okay.
And now it's all high rises. You have to almost go up to Nago, up north, to really see. But one of the things you see, and you go into the outskirts of Naha, and you'll see a huge apartment building here, in one little, traditional house there with the karashishi on top of it. Really looks out of place. And Naha now, or at least last time I was over there, looks like Tokyo.
Oh, okay.
Traffic is just ridiculous.
As you were bringing this up, I had done some work, and you brought up the
Makiwara.
Makiwara. In the Chinese martial arts, we would use things like a moki pai or mukjong, things like that. Wood posts and things along those lines, right? At least in the Chinese martial arts, it became almost a circus act. Slap a donkey and knock it out or something. And they would do the training to a point to where they could literally lose the function of their hands. And a lot of my sifu would say, that was never the intention of the iron palm training.
Not. That is the most. Now, years ago, I used to do a lot of tamashawari.
Okay.
But the Okinawans way, tamashawari is the breaking of boards, of bricks, etc.
Yes, right.
I did that coming up young. Before I did not start studying Makiwara training till I had been in karate for almost 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing Maki training, but I had never really studied it, if you know what I mean.
Okay, so you went to that new level of training. Is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
I never, I'd done all the other stuff, the Hojo Undo, which is your, the jars that you're talking about.
Yes.
And the actual understanding of a punch. Now, if you remember, Okinawa karate was done by little farmers and fishermen. That's where you come up with your Okinawan kabuto, their weapons. But a samurai, and back in the old days, if an Okinawan was caught studying karate, he was killed, and nothing was said. Okay? Their dojo, and it wasn't a dojo per se. They studied normally in their backyard or in the woods or somewhere like that. And the old man would take his son or his brother's son. He'd have a max of 3 people training. And this done at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, behind closed doors. But what they were having to do, because the Okinawans could not have weapons, was the samurai was not going to miss twice. But that little Okinawan farmer or fisherman had to make him miss once. And that's where you come up with the 1 punch, 1 kill thing. So all of the extra things that you are learning, here when we're taught to punch, we keep our elbow down and use 2 knuckles. Okay? Why? Well, because we are not developed enough to do this. One straight line. Okay? This, if you try to do it without the proper Hojo Undo or Makiwara training, all you're going to do is tear your elbow up.
Okay.
Okay? So, there are certain many exercises you do. When I do this, my arm is actually beyond 180 degrees.
I can
if
see
you look
it.
at the straight line.
Yes, sir. I can see it.
Okay? And if you look, this is the big knuckle. This is the one that ends up.
Right.
Okay?
Where?
That's the one you actually hit a person twice. Okay? When and I don't mean personal type stuff. This is, to me, like Tuite and Kusho Jutsu for the most part, is getting me to the point where it's my decision what I'm going to either, if you got a friend of yours who's a drunk, you're not going to try to kill him with one punch. You're just going to take him down or etc. Point being is, with Tuite and Jiu-Jitsu, is you're getting to a point where the decision is yours. The little Okinawan farmer did not have a decision. He didn't have to make a decision. His life was on the line. Okay? And he wasn't going to get a second chance. So they developed this way of punching, and that's where I think along the lines we've lost. People never go beyond punching the maki board. Now, I use bricks for my Hojo Undo training.
Okay.
Today I will do 900 repetitions, but not just on these 2 knuckles. I'll do it on these 2 knuckles, but those 2.
Okay.
I'm an infighter. I'm a little person like the Okinawa. Okay? I want to get close to you. So I use this and this. Okay? Big guy, strong guy like you, I could hit, if I hit you in the ribs with a fist, broke your ribs, you can still fight. Okay? I go through your ribs.
Yeah.
You're not going to cough, pee, belch,
Right.
pass gas, or nothing. You ever had her separated?
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah,
So, in the training of this, these are the things that you train through I'll do like today 900, training this, even this in particular.
So we get to a moment, since we're on the audio, when he's saying this and showing me this, we're talking about the first 2 digits of his knuckles.
Right.
And so y'all know, as he's describing this, his hand, you can see the development of his hand when he extends the punch. But there's no loss of, his hand functions perfectly well. But when he demonstrates the punch, you can actually, it's kind of like it shows the distinct development of his hands for the punching. Exactly. But as you're sitting here with me, it's not something that would, get my attention. It's like it's been holstered up and you wouldn't see it. But as soon as you start to move, it's very distinct that it pops out there. What we call a phoenix eye punch, right. With that it is very, very prominent.
And it's very, if you think about it, if you really think about it, and I know we're talking on the radio, right?
Well, we're close enough. Yes, sir.
At my age, it's a radio.
Yes, sir, radio.
But if you look at that fist, when you use this, and this goes back to Rokashu, and it's mentioned in the Bubishi, and this is the way the kata's done, all the way through. All the punches are done with this. But if you look at how my hand, the forefinger and the third digit over come together, this fits in between there, and then you close that becomes a very powerful fist. Okay? Same thing when you do this. If you take your forefinger, wrap your thumb around that. See how I'm doing this? And then grab it with your your middle finger. Now look how strong it makes that.
Okay. Now, this hand form is something similar to what you see in the Bubishi.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it is never explained
Exactly.
the way that you just explained it to. Because I've read people explain this punch many times, but never the way that you just explained this.
Now, I'd hate to take it this far, but when people punch, that's why they punch. They punch with a hard hand, okay? I have an old lithograph, or whatever you call them old things, an old picture somewhere around here in my mess, dated in the 1300s of them working on their piece of wood, their makiwara, but it's nothing but a piece of wood on the ground. There's about 3 guys sitting around it, and it's a depiction of early makiwara training the knuckles and this, that, and the other. Now, what happens is, and I think I went over this, but I don't want to be redundant, that for the first, 20 years, you'll have the softer, bigger knuckles. And then mine evolved somewhere in my mid-50s to where, and my hands are not arthritic.
That's what I was saying.
Flexible.
You got a lot of dexterity in your hands.
But I use Dit Da Jiao.
Okay.
Which is a Chinese herb.
I have 5 gallons of it sitting at my quone.
And 100 proof vodka.
Moonshine's what we use,
Yeah. But the interesting thing that I learned about not just makiwara training, but the spiritual side of that is that it really, when I'm doing this, I'll do 900 today, I'll do 1,800 tomorrow. Next day I won't do any. Okay, my hands just rest. Also, something that's interesting, if you'll notice the difference in my hands, my strongest punch is left-handed, not right-handed. And I am right-handed. But in Okinawa, and I don't know why they use this age, and what I've been told, that's all I can go by. But at 40, they'll back off on their left hand because of the meridians. Okay? Same thing with the kata sanchin.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And years ago, and I was told this by Takamayoshi Sensei, that they obviously did not have the medical understanding, but they were doing this, the older guys, and they would end up dying. Their head exploded is what the word they used. It was aneurysm. Okay. So most of them, when they do Sanchin now, they will do this, but this up here around the carotid arteries will not tighten. Okay? Same thing on the maki board. When I punch the maki board, I will go in about 1.5 inches till, when I'm extended. But with my left hand, I'll go in about 1/2 inch. But stupid here didn't back off till I was about 65.
Okay.
65 years old. But I figured that those old people did not have the medical knowledge per se as to what was happening. They didn't know what an aneurysm was.
Right.
But as I aged, I figured if they did this for hundreds of years, then I better not test it.
Right.
There's somewhere in there something is right. But makiwara training now has kind of gone away.
Just about disappeared. So that kind of leads me to a question. I know Ian had asked. Well, before we move, when you were training, Samantha had asked, were there mainland Japanese folks learning karate in Okinawa during the 50s and all as well? Or
Japanese?
Yeah.
I'm sure that there was a few of them, but my teacher, my Nakazato sensei, who's now, God rest his soul, passed away, he was constricted into the Japanese Army in World War II.
Okay.
And they moved him up to Japan, and here again, this is different.
Mm-hmm.
They moved him up to Japan and ended up teaching karate, to the Japanese, not by choice. But he told us, sitting around at dinner one night, he said, I don't teach Okinawa karate. I teach hand movements, that's all. Because back then he was pure Okinawan.
Mm-hmm.
And today, fortunately, unfortunately, no matter how you look at it, everything in Okinawa started changing in 1972 when we turned Okinawa back over to the Japanese. Okay, I don't know if it's a good thing, bad thing. They developed into almost a Japanese culture.
Okay.
A lot of the karate is moving towards competition.
Okay.
Okay, it's in the Olympics this year.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Okay. I competed, I can't remember, I won 2 or 3 national championships, AAU championships. Can't remember the last one, but I think in my late 50s.
Okay.
Or 60. Yeah, somewhere around there. I can't remember that far back. But, and Taika Oyata said this, that it is disheartening because my people, meaning the Okinawans, and he lived over here for years and years and years, are moving in martial arts more towards the Japanese, which literally is based on sport and physical fitness.
Yes, sir.
Instead of life protection.
So it's interesting because in my mind I'm reflecting when we were talking earlier. You, as a practitioner, being there at the time, couldn't differentiate between Hogan and Japanese language.
No,
right?
Could not.
But you could differentiate between Okinawan culture and Japanese culture and Okinawan karate and Japanese martial arts, as it was culturally.
Absolutely.
You could distinguish those two things very clearly. But when it came, but when the words were coming out of your mouth, you couldn't tell whether they were Japanese or Okinawan. I think that's really interesting. That a lot of times when we talk about martial arts, as you and I were talking about that night, a lot of times things can be translated and spoken, but unless the culture is extended with what you're trying to say, a lot of the context can get lost, and a lot of understanding can get lost. In that transition sometimes too.
My son Jason, and I hate to say this, but he speaks Japanese on a level above the Japanese. He speaks almost on a political level.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Nakazato sensei said about my son Jason, said, you're talking to Jason Perry, you're talking up.
Okay.
Because he is that good. But not only his language skill, but he understands the culture, the Japanese culture. He understands Japanese culture more than he does the Okinawan culture, but he does know the difference
and he can see
how these things work. But the Japanese would not, in many cases, and I don't want to say this the wrong way, would not come to Okinawa on Marseille to train. I'm sure some of them did. I never trained with the Japanese in Okinawa.
Okay.
but the most part, back when, never saw them.
Okay.
And the differences, not just the subtle differences. Now my son Jason, who is an Okinawan practitioner, who also has a black belt issued by the Kodokan in judo.
Okay.
And he studied jiu-jitsu, aikido-jitsu, etc. While he was, he was an advisor to Japanese self-defense forces, went to the Japanese International War College. He was a foreign area officer, etc., etc., etc. So he has spent years in Japan on a high level. And he really understands the difference. But Nakazato Sensei is the only person I've ever read about, that I have read per se, that actually said the difference between Okinawa and Japanese karate. That, the Japanese, it's a more of a health thing.
Physical education was one of the
sport.
Yeah.
Where he said the Okinawans use it as a life protection art. That if your life's in danger, and it's the same thing with Maki training. You hit somebody, your hands are not conditioned, you hurt yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So we have a Ian had asked me, and this would you've kind of with the Moki water training. Ian had asked me what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen happen in karate over the past 60 years. So some of the things that may have been positive changes, some of the things that may have been negative changes, but what's been some of the biggest changes you've seen in karate?
Okay, starting at the beginning, I wasn't the first one in trained in Okinawan Karate. Americans, some of these guys in World War II, and, etc. But we did the very basic. The Okinawans taught us the very, very basic on what you're doing. This is a punch. This is a kick.
Okay.
They did not, at that time, explain a whole lot. They couldn't. None of us spoke Japanese. They didn't speak English, So it was a very rudimental starting. And when we did kumite, I excelled. Why? Because I had 14 years of boxing. So I could really handle myself, as far as that goes. I just had to start watching out people's sweeps and kicks. But it was probably, be right honest with you, and I keep using 18 years. 18 years before I started the study of karate.
So you've been practicing all that time, but that real in-depth kind of study.
All I wanted to do was fight.
Okay.
The only reason I did kata was maybe because Sensei made me do it. Okay? But my interest was in fighting. I came up on the streets of North Charlotte fighting. Went in the ring when I was in 1946 and started fighting. So my interest was always in fighting. In 1974, I trained with a guy in Okinawa, just me and him. He was a family system. The whole system consisted of about 4 people.
Okay.
Because the old man would have nothing to do with Americans. He lost one of his brothers jumping off the cliffs when the Marines landed. And another one that later on, it could have been a Japanese shell, lost half his arm.
Okay.
Anyway, he was showing me Hanshi kata. He said, "Let me see your Hanshi." So I showed it to him, and he said, "What does that mean?" And I kind of showed something very rudimental, very basic. Boom. Because, I hit hard. My hands were hard, my arms were hard, etc. He said, think about it this way. So he showed me the first move in Hanshi here, and he threw me halfway across that damn cane field. I mean, just boom. And he was about my size. I got back up and said, man, I love this. And so I really then started studying, kata. And looking at marking water training as an art and a basic development of my karate. Okay. By then, some of those, and I'm using 1974 as a turning time.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
They were getting where we could communicate.
Okay.
Okay, just like Yoshi-chan did me. He said, you know, this in Hanshi. He said, this is not the only thing. He said, but look at this. Boom. He said, uke does not, uke does not mean block. He said, it means to receive. He said, if you really think about the essence of Okinawan Karate, there are no blocks. He said, you have, in life protection, you have one aim. But by then, people were being able, we could communicate with them on a level. Okay? A lot of the guys that were going back over and married Okinawan girls and were stationed in Okinawa, they became very proficient in Japanese language. So it got to where we could exchange and they could teach us about things. And this is where again, going back to my punch and how I punch, you know. And this is something that people have to find out for themselves. That they talk about a 1-inch punch and see them talk about in China. Okay, Bruce Lee got
famous for it. Yeah.
Bless his heart, you know, one of those. But you know, they talk about the hand here and then punching. The Okinawans hit, and seriously, even the maki board with an open hand. And as if you look at the punch, and I know we're talking on the radio, but as you look at the punch here, my hand is open when I hit you. And then you have this. So when I do this, my hand goes I'm already touching you. It's not a 1-inch punch. I'm already touching you. But when I close the hand and lock this down, it goes through. So I'm literally hitting you twice.
Okay. All right, that's why when you said it, okay. And you could feel that too, so when you were doing that.
So the hand becomes a whip. If you think of a cowboy with a whip, he's breaking the sound barrier with that whip. Wow! That's where you hear the pop. People take their gi and try to make it pop. Okay? That's wonderful. Sounds good in a tournament or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Keeping in mind that many years ago, none of us had a gi.
No. Right, well, when you were touring.
We never wore top anyway. But to me, the change in my lifetime, you know, most people been in, karate 18 years, figured they already know everything. Hell, I figured 18 years and I didn't know nothing.
Okay.
I knew how to fight. And when I say how to fight, I knew how to fight to win. I didn't know how to fight per se as a life protection art. I had the tools, and I had developed to that point. Okay. But that's when I started really to study karate and see a whole different way. And one of the good things, especially here in the United States, and the Okinawans have a hard time understanding this. Okay, your patch does not look like my patch. When we were down at Troy Price's, we were all trained together, and there was probably, 10, 12 different styles down there. Okay, none of that is wrong. But what you do is share information, which something the Okinawans never did. You know, everything was kakashide. That means a secret technique. Kakashide. I'm not going to give you information to where you can whip me.
And I'm sure some of that just had to do with cultural trust too, right?
Oh, good God, yes.
I mean, you know, one of the things when I was learning Chinese martial arts, my sifu would say, you know, in Chinese culture, you don't know anybody till you've known them 7 years, and that was the rule. And so one of the things that we would be taught. So for me, I was not taken to the other side, so to speak. I was taught, given the tools, trained hard. But it wasn't until about the 6.5 year where he came to me. I've been with him for about 6.5, 7 years at that point, where he said, I'm going to take you to a different place at this point. And the training was utilized. It was the same tools. So everything I had been given and trained with up to that point was still used but he showed me a whole new ways of using these things that I had not been exposed to before. But it was much like what you were saying. There was a matter of trust there that had to be earned through the course of time and experiences.
And it was something that you had been doing all along, but you never really looked in. I know what I'm doing, but I don't know why I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. And if you look nowadays on many, even karate guys, when they do tuite or something, that's fine. But the idea in life protection is to get to you, where the decision becomes mine on whether you're going to live or die. Okay, and I hate to say it that way, but
ultimately it could very easily come to that point.
Exactly. So when we go to these places like we did at Troy's, you know, and I get a chance to watch guys like you, and I was sitting in on your class, watch guys like you, I learned something. You know, I learned something. Or I see something that I would like to pursue. So what we have here in the United States, and the Okinawans some of them will tell you this, that many of the Americans' karate is equal to ours. You know, and I'm not saying that not because I do, because I don't. But from being able to do this, okay, in Okinawa, you don't have a Shorin-ryu guy going to Wechi Dodo. Okay? Now, in my position in the Marine Corps in 1974, I was a captain then, but I had a lot to do with industrial relations, meaning the Okinawans. I had Okinawans that worked for me. I didn't know they did, but they did. So most of them knew who I was. And the Marines that trained around in Motobu, Ishin-ryu, Wechi-ryu, etc., Goju-ryu, I go in any dojo I went to go in and train. The Okinawans wouldn't do that or couldn't do that. And I had an open door. Not because of my karate rank, but it was really because of my Marine Corps rank and my association with and I didn't know I had this association. I had the lieutenants that did it, the Okinawan community. Okay? And now, if you look at this, things like we had down at Troy's and people getting together, like on my camp, when I had this September, you know, I had people as far away from Chile that came to that. And had all these different systems. You know, Bill Hayes was there, Larry Isaac, of course, Troy. And everywhere. I love Troy because he's 2 inches shorter than I am. He's one of the little people. But now we can't say that we have arrived. If we do that, we just step back 200 years. Or in my case, 60, 70 years. But we have the opportunity because of the way we can associate, you know. I think now that's available, that Wechi-ryu looks at something one way, a Chinese martial artist, another, even a Japanese. And we can share this because, you look at the Chinese stuff, they go back 4,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think we have right now in the United States and in Europe. Europe is very, very big now in this. But we have everything that's needed to advance spiritually and emotionally and physically in our karate. Mm-hmm. When I first started punching markboard, I did bust my knuckles. Mm. And even back in those days, just throwing something in there, they say if you broke your knuckles, they get tougher. And talking to somebody later in 74 or so, to the Okinawans, said, no, you break your knuckle, you just broke your damn knuckle and it's got to heal up and you got to start over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no advantage in that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And but you get these rumor control, and it's just different.
And you've alluded to this to some degree, but it is a good question. What piece of information or understanding do you wish you would have had known sooner that would have been of value to you early in your karate development?
That I would have taken my kata more seriously.
I want to just pause you for a moment. Mr. Ian Abernathy, I'm sure, is smiling from ear to ear right now because this is one of the things he likes to talk a lot about and really encourages is that a real attention and the usefulness. And if you would take what is your perceptions and what do you believe is the usefulness of the kata? What are you looking to do with that work? And why would a good karateka or in Chinese martial arts, same when I work on my tech, yeah, absolutely. What would you tell me or anyone else to look for while you were doing your karate?
Well, now after over 60 years in karate, kata is to be right honest with you, kata did not begin technique. Then they had to hide the kakashi, they had to hide the technique, so they hid it in the beginning in their movements. Mm-hmm. Didn't even call them kata, but movements. Now that karate is developed to this level now, the study, not just trying to win trophies. I got 1,000 trophies out in my garage and up in my attic. Okay? Never earned me anything. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I went through that phase, so to speak. But everything that we do, starting physically, timing, rhythm, and breathing, when we start kata, dadgummit, I never saw a count in kata until 1968. You just fell in the back, and in Tatsuo's dojo, you learned this move in Seun, this here, etc. Mm-hmm. And you worked on that till you came back to the dojo, and then within 3 or 4 months, you might be able to get half of the kata down. No counting. You just worked at it. Now, everything goes to the count in the beginning. And I'm not saying everything, but you think about it. And it is a good way to teach a beginner. Now, the problem being is you see guys that are, Doshinkai type, Doshinkai, 6-degree black belts and above, that, we train together or something. They never get beyond the study of kata, beyond the count. They'll go, you can tell by their breathing, timing, rhythm, and breathing. If I'm counting kata for Tim Smith, whose kata are you doing? You're doing my kata. You're doing it like I tell you to. 1, 2, 3, 4, just like you're marching in the Marine Corps. Okay? In combat, like an operator, and believe me, I love operation orders like crap, but in combat, some guy writes up an operation order, and this is the way you're going to fight the battle. The first damn round, Cussing too much.
No, you're
the first round fired, you throw that operation out the door, and it becomes a war. Okay,
we're in a fluid situation.
Absolutely. But the study of kata, and in my regret, I'm 18 years I did kata, but I did not study it for myself, and now I regret that I don't have another 50 years to really try to understand it. And one of the other things that I learned in the study of kata, and I'm using, and obviously if I'm talking to me, you know I'm not educated or smart, okay? I was never paid to be smart or educated. One of the things that I've learned from associating, again, with kata, and I think here in the United States we have that. I teach 3 kata now that are primarily Chinese. Okay? Kata develops you physically, it develops you mentally, it elevates the soul. If you do kata for yourself, you know. Years ago when I was taking a test and I had to do everything in the system from boom, one kata right after another, like 20 hand kata, 12, 13 weapons kata, yakusoku kumite, this, that, and the other, fight everybody in the place type thing. And my teacher at that time said, you do Doug Perry karate. You get out there and do Doug Perry karate. Okay. So what I've learned over the years now, you know, because you don't want to do it for your physical fitness, you want to do it for your spirituality, and I don't mean to use words like that, but I now teach Gohoken, Rokushu,
which I got to do with you,
Hakusuru.
And Hakusuru.
Okay. These are for guys, really. The first thing you lose in your aging process is balance. I use all 3 of those kata to try to keep my balance at almost 81 years old as I could 15 years ago.
And I can testify to the fact that I've seen him do these, and he's as well balanced and better balanced than many of us who are quite a bit younger. Yeah, I was very, very impressed. I mean, not just the conversation we had with you and the fellowship that I had with you, but then the actual, you know, working out with you and training with you that, you know, while we were down there, and seeing you move and going through, it was like this whole package. And when you use the word spirituality, we would say there was Shingi, Cholifoot, you know, these styles of martial arts. But you would learn all these martial arts to make Tim Fu, right? Instead of Kung Fu, you have Tim Fu, right? So it was like, you know, Doug Perry's kata was something that you had to earn through the course of the developing the tools and the understanding, and then one day that the tools and the understanding become you. And you can separate those two, that you can see and go, okay, yes, I'm going to teach you Shingi Kung Fu. And then I'm going to teach you Bakwa Kung Fu. And then one day you're going to have your Kung Fu. But when I'm teaching, I usually try to make it clear, I'm never trying to give you your Kung Fu.
Exactly.
You have to find that and earn it yourself, because I can't give it to you.
Well, what happens in many cases is that, and I think I said this before, that we don't go beyond the count. And, you know, it's easy to say timing, rhythm, you know, timing, breathing, timing, rhythm, etc. It's easy to say that. But in teaching, and this is kind of a funny thing in kata, and this is one of my really great students. He's a Rokudan, okay? I made him start concentrating on, at the explosion, to grab the floor with his heel and his toes for one instant. That way, if you study the Bubishi, you know, they say there's 2 kata, one up top and one down at the bottom. But if you continue to really study the Bubishi, it all becomes one focus from the Hata.
Okay.
Okay, so I was making this guy do difficult kata, but I said, I want you to concentrate on your toes and locking your heels into the ground. And this guy's highly educated. He has a doctorate. Mm-hmm. He was going, he said, I was thinking to myself, I can't figure out how the hell I can grab my toes and my heel into the ground, etc. Anyway, we got through, and he just screwed everything up. And I said, what's the problem? He said, my toes and heels I locked down, couldn't remember the damn kata.
So a lot of ways, I often wondered, because we, in Chinese martial arts, it's not presented in that very distinguished way you just said it, but it would often talk about, make sure that you train with the root.
Right.
And have, some sit like that, and the root being in that lower part of yourself. And most people would try to demonstrate that as like you were real heavy and sunken, but they didn't have that. It was they would get stiff in their legs.
Exactly.
Instead of having that, like you were just describing, that gripping the earth and letting go.
And this, oddly enough, develops from your basic kata, and when I say basic kata, I'm talking my Hanshi type kata, which everything else is based on, really.
Okay.
When people look at their kata, they are, I don't want to say, unless you're by yourself training, they are normally trying to impress somebody. And if you think about this, you go to a tournament, you got 5 or 3 judges, you're trying to impress them, okay? If you go to a test, you're trying to impress the board or your sensei or etc. Demonstration, you're doing the same thing. Okay? In my opinion, that is self-expression. You're expressing this yourself to people.
Okay.
Then if you really kind of look at it, when you do it by yourself and no one else matters, you're doing it for self-understanding.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the first half of that program. A few things that he really emphasized, a core part of his training: timing, rhythm, and breathing. The second thing I noted was that he emphasized that balance, your ability to maintain a fluid sense of balance, as well as at the same time being able to develop a root. I really can't explain to you the amount of knowledge and training he has in the Makiwara training and how important it is, and the full dexterity. I mean, it was an incredible thing for me to be able to watch him explain that work. The fourth thing I noted here in the first hour was that how much he emphasized the study of your kata. The only regret that he had was that he wished he would have started sooner, and that he wished he had another 50 years or so to keep studying it. But one of the most important things that I got from that is the study of your forms and your work for a sense of developing self-understanding, rather than always working it to be self-expressive and demonstrating it to others. That meant a whole lot to me. And the last thing that I can sincerely tell you, that if you spend any time around Hanshi Doug Perry, that you'll realize very, very quickly, is that he does not let up on the expectation of to continue learning, to continue digging, and continuing to pursue your self-understanding in your martial arts. I can promise you that part 2 is just going to be filled with as much information, incredibly good stories, and it will be available for you very soon. Make sure that you check your show notes or on the website, and I'll have some links there that you can find his materials. If you'd like the opportunity to meet and see Hanshi Doug Perry, try to get to some of the Shuri-Te Bujutsu Kai seminars. The next international conference is going to be in April, and you can find all of the information there at kungfupodcast.com/Shuri-Te Shirite. Take care and be looking for part 2 very, very soon.